right. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to first thank everybody for coming today and spending some time with us. Today we're exploring how to streamline the critical processes of migrating from an IDP to another platform like Entra. There's a lot of concerns and a lot of risks that we need to think about before we move to something like that. And we help you guys do that in a more seamless, uh, less risky, and low cost way. And we're going to go through these challenges today. We've got a great panel of experts with us. Let me take a few moments here to introduce those experts. We've got Vishal Amin, who's who's close to MightyID. He's a friend of mine. He's general manager of Microsoft Federal. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the excitement that he has around not only migrating to Microsoft Entra, but also how we as a partner in MightyID do that. Obviously, I'm here introducing everybody. I'm the COO for MightyID. We have a couple other really great experts, Jerry Miller, who's our director of product management at MightyID, and he'll talk through some of the challenges, and he'll talk through the capabilities and features and how MightyID helps make this an easier transition for everybody. And Ben Dimick, who's an expert partner with Tevora, director of security services there, and he'll talk through some of the migration challenges and the processes and the customer success stories that they've had using MightyID for this. So, as I covered, migrating can be a risky thing. A lot of people are concerned about it. A lot of people don't even know where to begin. So, we'll talk through those challenges. We'll talk through, how we can accelerate your migration, how we can reduce costs, and how we can ensure business continuity along the way. So let's go ahead and dive in and discover how we can make this transition as seamless as possible. And to start that, I'd like to introduce Vishal, and he'll share some words and thoughts about this path.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. And for the MightyID team, congratulations from all of us at Microsoft. I think we've just established just this brilliant new partnership, or expanded on a partnership with MightyID on the importance of identity in our space as security professionals. And for me specifically, even as a national security professional, working through the 18 different sectors of critical infrastructure. I think one of the things that a lot of individuals see and CISOs and practitioners see when we talk about identity is the impact of identity outside of just our cost centers. And I think that part is something we may talk about a little later. And, without diving into some of maybe the resistance to change, our identity providers, our financial cost, our relationships, the compliance issues, what are some of the things that are really amazing about, and what we're excited about in terms of Entra are the ability to seamlessly transition any identity provider into Entra, right? The enhanced security that comes with it is something that we've been working on at Microsoft for some time now, providing just strong features like conditional access, MFA, and all these other pieces of functionality that we require within all of our assets in our organization. But identity is more than just something that we utilize to put into our infrastructure, into our networks, and into our environments. And what identity really does is it gives us the ability to interact with each other and what I like to call mission continuity. I think one of the biggest gaps we see in this industry is our ability to understand how to actually adopt innovation and utilize it to transform mission. There was a scenario back in, when I was in the Marine Corps, and there was a scenario back in 2015 where we transitioned from an entire infrastructure into a different environment, and we were using thousands of applications. I was the air officer on an operation doing a hostage rescue, and we had to utilize a whole different application, a whole different system, and we did not have the time and the ability to move all of our data over into that secondary environment. And we ended up utilizing multiple identity platforms to access the data, to access the applications, to do so. And we went around the policies and went around the governance to be able to do that work, and ended up utilizing unpatched systems, unpatched applications. We ended up not being able to scale the work that we were doing, which led to vulnerabilities in those mission systems we were utilizing, and at cost of not being able to seamlessly migrate that data. Because of our identity challenges, we weren't able to complete that mission. And when you look at critical infrastructure like hospitals, when you look at critical infrastructure like healthcare and financial institutions, I see identity not as the forefront of something that's required, but I see it as something that is needed to keep those legacy on-premises systems and applications online so that the surgeries don't stop, so that the financial institutions don't stop their day-to-day work. And I think those core components of our mission in every single one of our organizations is key to identity management. I think the advantages of Entra ID and a seamless transition go into things like single sign-on, zero trust implementation, and lastly, cost efficiency. One of the things we see the most, especially in the federal government, when we're looking at implementing identity in different mission sets, is we own these things already. Let's turn them on. Let's look at them. Let's make them seamlessly integrate in all the other mission assets that we have, whether it's Microsoft 365, whether it's Azure, whether we have to tie in multiple identities into one. Having that seamless migration path to solve for the security challenges, the compliance barriers, the cost efficiency, all those challenges that we see, especially within identity management, all comes to a head. And at the end of the day, we want that good user experience so that we can continue our business operations. So what I'll say here to tie up all these thoughts is Entra ID is an amazing platform that really has security baked in to its core, but it's only as good as our own ability to seamlessly migrate with all of those components in mind so that we can continue our business operations without pause. And I love the work, Chris, that you guys are doing over at MightyID. I think when you and I and Ray and a lot of us were kind of speaking about, hey, how do you better partner with Microsoft? We were talking about the business continuity and the complex migration and the losses that we see there. We're also talking about the scalability and the integration of Entra ID and why it was so important, especially for organizations that have multiple identity platforms, specifically some of our identity partners like Okta and others, right? It makes it really complex for us to operate in an environment where we have 100 different identities and we need to migrate into one. And to really meet those compliance frameworks and those boundaries so that we can continue, and me as a prior operator, to be able to go do the mission, to go do the hostage rescues, to go do the surgeries, which I don't have the brain power to do, right? We need all of our systems to work right away. And I think the one thing that I'm excited to learn a little more about today is the ability to do some of that investigative work and make those changes during the migration. I think that was the power and the differentiator I saw in the MightyID piece that really drew me to our partnership, right, with you from the Microsoft side, is that during migration, ability to pause, make changes, and see all of that real time while that migration was happening seamlessly. I think that was something that I don't see anywhere else. So I'd love to turn this back over to you, Chris, and kind of go through that scalability, that integration, and show everyone kind of what this partnership is all about.
Well, very kind words, Vishal. I appreciate it. And yes, thank you. A few things that you touched on just about, that considering a move to Microsoft Entra provides a lot of value in the sense of enhanced security, compliance, and cost and consolidation, reduced complexity, and seamless integration into the Microsoft ecosystem, where you can leverage all the rest of the Microsoft security suite and expertise to ensure your identities are safe and protected. So that, we totally see that same value in doing it. It's why we moved our product into this kind of space where we can help customers take advantage of that and reduce their risks along the way. And there are challenges that come with that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, one of the things that just really rung right when we were talking about why this was the case, and I was thinking about the example I just used, but I think at the end of the day, if you quantify all that stuff I just said, user experience prevents us from doing these types of things. And when you can minimize the frustration of users and make it so that there's no change in how we log in and access our critical applications, that changes the entire user experience interface. And that is the key to a successful identity management and migration, is enabling the user to not have to relearn, relog in, change their experience. And I think that's kind of the crux of, probably, if I was to say one thing for everyone here, is if you can keep that user experience the same and not challenge and frustrate your teams, that is the core of a successful migration.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, it makes it easier for the user to be secure and follow the policies. Like you said earlier, when things get hard, people start looking for ways to, get stuff done, even if it means they have to go around things. And when you can make the user experience fantastic and easy to use and everything like that, and it's secure inherently and integrated with the rest of your security
Right.
environment, it's a win-win for both, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, very, very, very great insights. And again, appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and for the kind words, obviously. And we're gonna dive into some of these challenges that that Vishal touched on when we go, if we move forward here. Some of the challenges that happen when we think about wanting to move, they can be pretty daunting and pretty scary. Jerry Miller from MightyID is going to talk about this. He's going to dive into these challenges a little bit more, and he's also going to talk about what MightyID does and how we do it to alleviate and reduce the risk of these challenges. So, good morning, Jerry. Please take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. You and VJ mentioned some great and important concepts around identities and sort of where the market has been headed, specifically around consolidation and integration of those identities. And what had really has put the spotlight on is just how important the continued availability of those identities are, becoming critical to the business. In addition to that, it's also the overall user impact and user experience. And a lot of those things contribute to project complexity and risk. As many of you know, vendor lock has been a significant barrier for customers wishing to change identity provider for many of the reasons shown here, because of these concerns around user impact and project complexity and risk. For example, often there are too many users combined with too many memberships and assignments to manage easily, any of which could lead to a permission problem. And sometimes those can be very difficult to uncover later, a misconfiguration during a migration or some mistake that is made for some type of script. The sheer number of these usually require batching, so you have to do them in phases. Batching creates its own level of complexity. Now you have multiple updates to the configurations and assignments, further complicating the effort and further increasing the likelihood of user impact and business impact. And batch scripts just can't really do that very well. We've had customers with over 1,500 applications. Each application may have its own unique challenges. Often identity providers have a complex set of dependencies and rules that must be reverse engineered before creating or updating, plus the manual step of refreshing, doing something like refreshing app credentials. That can be not trivial, and it can also potentially impact the user experience or even user uptime or system uptime. Often companies have homegrown applications with their own unique needs. We have a customer that we're migrating with over 1,000 custom application instances. So you can't rely on catalog apps and templates. So there's really a lot of custom work required. In addition to that, the customers typically have multiple application owners. So each one of those has to be coordinated with, because we need access to some type of, whether it's credentials or some type of access or some type of verification. So there's this whole overall effort around managing the project around their availability. So you don't have these scheduling nightmares or again, business impact, user downtime. Then you have individual identity providers have specific custom configuration options, and those don't easily map. This is what necessitates the need for a professional services component, because often these must be redesigned manually, again, around the notion of a seamless user experience that is in one provider as well as the other. And then lastly, usually there's a hard deadline, such as a subscription renewal date that we have to work around. Not only does this drive the timeline, but usually, as we all, I'm sure, have experienced, companies are usually too late to approve the project. This creates a lot of pressure to move faster than desired. Moving faster, as we all know, tends to cause rushing. Rushing leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to business impact. So how can you move quickly but responsibly and still meet the renewal date? And so this is why we've built MightyID. So MightyID started as an idea. One of the first Okta integration partners, Tevora, discovered that not only was there no way to copy a tenant configuration to another tenant, but no backup or restore capability as a safety net during the actual implementation. Once we were able to take a snapshot of that tenant and move it around, the next step was to move it to another provider. So we built a generic transformer engine that allows us to easily move configurations between providers. That is the core of our migration feature that allows our integration partner to handle more projects more quickly and safely. So in addition to enabling migrations from a provider to Entra, MightyID also allows backup, restoration, and tenant migration for those same tenants. So we use a flexible and fast restoration capability to allow users to choose what to restore and where, whether that's a sandbox environment, a backup tenant, or a tenant in another provider for something like an emergency failover option. Continuous backups give us a point-in-time recovery capability to minimize RPO or the data lost during transition. This gives true tenant portability. So what we're really trying to do is provide for this notion of being able to port your identities between providers, whether you change vendor permanently as part of a planned migration project or temporarily during an emergency using our failover service, which is really a kind of a rushed migration, if you think about it. So our platform value falls into three primary use cases. First, the ability to recover from errors is paramount, whether it's known or unknown changes. We have a $200 billion financial services company using MightyID specifically to ensure they have a DR plan for their critical identities because they know they don't have a backup, no secondary user source, or the master is not backed up. So we provide that capability. Another use case that is the one we're talking about today, which is to change providers, also known as identity provider migration. We've seen significant interest, as I'm sure you have, in Okta customers and other providers moving to Entra. Once they learn this capability is possible, we have several of these under our belt, and we have some of them are quite large. A third use case that we've seen is consolidating tenants and providers. To Vijay's point, the desire to consolidate has not always been met with the ability to migrate and consolidate. Our very first customer had a number of acquisitions with no hope to consolidate them until they discovered our platform. And we've been able to successfully help them do significant consolidation, again, safely with low project risk and quickly. So let's dig into what the value that MightyID actually adds for a migration project. First of all, I want to be clear. A migration is a project. It's not just a tool. Ben's going to go into this in a little bit more detail. But what the tool provides is key leverage to make the project not only realistic, but also faster and safer. We can continuously copy users, groups, and applications, and all of their associations between providers. We support refreshing all of those attributes and associations to keep the other tenant in sync throughout the project, allowing the business to continue operating. This allows staggering deployments, staggering configuration steps to manage around application owner schedules and any manual configuration without downtime or user impact. We also provide backup and restore services to protect both the source tenant as well as the new destination tenant throughout the project. So we add an additional element of safety, not only for any errors that occur as a result of the migration, but any errors that occur operationally as a normal course of business. The client can then easily switch to a recovery subscription after the project is complete to keep our DR capabilities and to keep their tenants safe. We also add some additional value-added features, some investigation, audit, and analysis tools. This really comes about because Tevora, being a company that is built around ensuring the compliance of their clients, we've carried that compliance pedigree into our platform and built a lot of features and a lot of value with the notion of improving a company's compliance, right? So we're not a typical startup that kind of fakes it until we make it. Not only do these tools assist with a project, but they also assist with daily operations. So we're adding value for both the operators as well as the compliance staff. I'll pass it here to our integration partner, Ben from Tevora, and he'll talk you through the project process itself.
Thanks, Jerry. My name is Ben Dimick. As Jerry mentioned, I lead up the identity implementation teams at Tevora. So I'm really in the weeds with my team day in and day out around all the various identity projects that Tevora is engaged in. Today, I wanted to really walk through a couple of things. I wanted to share what the experience looks like when you're going through a migration using MightyID, as well as share some stories that we've had with actual Tevora and MightyID customers to get an idea of what it really looks like in the real world. But at a high level, what you're seeing here is effectively what Tevora's process looks like for taking on a migration project with MightyID. We're generally starting off with an initial assessment. So we follow the assess, plan, build, run approach, where we're starting off by conducting an assessment of the current state. That ultimately leads into the planning phase. That helps us to build out exactly what the order of operations is going to look like and how everything is going to be executed. One of the great points I appreciate that Vishal brought up was the idea of maintaining the user experience, ensuring that it's a smooth transition, and that users are readily enabled throughout the entire process. That really comes into having a strong assess and plan phase here. Following that, that's where the build step comes in. And this is really where MightyID is doing a significant amount of the heavy lifting and supporting the overall migration process. And ultimately, we're finishing things out strong in the run phase by ensuring your team is enabled to support the process moving forward. We want to ensure that we're not left in a state where anyone is feeling like things were better off before the migration and that everything is in a stronger state as a result of it as we're proceeding throughout the whole process. But with that said, that's at a very high level. Let me get into a couple of specific examples here and talk about a couple of real customers that we have. The first one that we have here was a situation where we were approached by a client at Tevora. They mentioned that they had a very short period of time and thousands of applications within Okta that they needed to move to Entra in a short period of time. The fact is that without MightyID, we typically would have expected a migration like this to take anywhere between 1 and 2 years in order to maintain the overall process. But in their case, they only had months to complete the entire transition process. As we started to execute on it, we were able to have significant success. Calling out here specifically on the slide that the overall project was the cost was reduced by 40% is the current estimates by having MightyID included. That's reduction in time, in labor, even after factoring in licensing costs and so on and so forth. Everything was executing much more cheaply than was expected. I also mentioned in terms of timeline, the project took about 50% as long as it would have without MightyID, and even completed 6 weeks ahead of schedule from that perspective. So even with MightyID, we're still able to operate ahead of the estimates there. Also, we've touched on this just a little bit here, but we also enabled a no downtime migration. So as Vishal had mentioned, one of the challenges that frequently comes up during migrations is getting in a state where there's multiple identity providers in play. Users are having to juggle multiple systems concurrently and having to recall exactly which systems enable which applications. But with MightyID, we're able to avoid that entirely, and users simply have one day they're on one system, and then the next day they're on the next system. So it's a no downtime migration ultimately when it comes down to it. There was a lot of other complexity to this project, but again, MightyID allowed us to get things enabled quickly and ahead of schedule, which then enabled us to have the time that we needed to tackle those more complex items such as managing specific types of users that needed a little bit of special care. So it was a huge win for Tevora as well as for our client during this process overall. Another important client that we had to touch on here is a particular software developer we were working with heavily. In their case, they had another situation where they needed to migrate within a timely period. But as a software developer, they have a strong company culture for rapid change. One of the challenges that came up was that there was a lot of things that needed to move. They needed to happen very quickly, but they also had a lot of people, a lot of power users that needed a strong ability to manage their own applications and make rapid changes. They really were embodying the entire agile movement process. But as we were working with them, one of the biggest strengths that MightyID provided was the capability to back up and track changes. This enabled them throughout the migration to be able to feel free to experiment with different configurations and different settings to have their users beginning to train on it, because it made it simple for us to roll things back when there was a change that ultimately ended up being undesirable. This really allowed them to feel a lot more confident with exactly how they were executing on the migration. Similar to our last one, we had a significant reduction in cost overall by using MightyID. We also had a no downtime migration that did complete ahead of schedule as well. And ultimately, we enabled them to continue to use MightyID in their corporate culture moving forward to maintain their identity resilience in the future. Now, to actually dive into the way that the project executes, we basically break it down into roughly 6 phases here, and these accompany closely with the methodology I mentioned previously. This first step here, in this case, Tevora, as the integrator, is heavily engaged with the client. We're really going through and doing the initial planning, the initial assessment as well, making sure we have a good grasp on exactly what we're backing up, exactly what's being transferred over, and exactly what the overall user experience and requirements are going to look like. At that point, and we're focused here heavily on what things look like for migrating from Okta to Entra as an example. But really at this point, we're for the second step, we're beginning to loop in MightyID. We're ensuring that it has the integration between Okta and Entra to facilitate the migration process itself. And that's really Tevora starting to come in at this point and beginning to execute on the integration and migration tasks specifically. For our clients, most of their role during this phase is ensuring that access is in place, ensuring that everything that has been planned and documented still looks correct. Going into the third phase here, really that this comes down to performing some of the foundational Entra configurations. This is where things like conditional access policies come into play, ensuring that we have the right plans around scheduling and notifying users and so on and so forth. And then the fourth phase here is where we're really beginning to execute the migration itself. At this point, MightyID is running full steam in terms of the work it's providing overall. Tevora's primary function here is ensuring everything is coming through according to schedule, and that everything is operating as expected. And that's what our client is typically doing as well, conducting their user access testing, making sure that everything looks correct as we're going through it. Step 5 here, during this phase, generally speaking, most of the components are migrated over. We have everything in place, and really, MightyID's primary function is to support, ensure that the backups are executing properly, and this is when we are now notifying users of what the expected change is going to be, what the day is going to be that they will, in this case, stop using Okta, start using Entra ID, and be ready to go from there. And then the last phase here is effectively we're validating that the go live has been executed successfully. We're completing any type of manual configuration that has to be completed here, and ultimately getting everything cleaned up as well as getting the final processes wrapped up. Mentioned it a couple times, but this is a zero downtime migration. There's not a point where, for instance, we have to sequester the entire IT team for a weekend to cut over all the applications. There's no point where users have to keep track of half of their apps in one system and half of their apps in another system. They just get to the day of go live and they're told to start using the new system, and that's it. There's no point of having to look back at that point. We really try to make sure that there is a single user impacting event so that users don't have to be constantly updating their processes as they're executing on it overall. But high level, it looks fairly simple from this regard. There's been an awful lot of work that's done to make it this simple and to get it to this point. MightyID has been making the process a little simpler every day, and it definitely has been showing overall. But with that, let me go ahead and turn it back over to Chris to wrap out with some final thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Jerry. Really, really great insights here. And thanks for sharing your experiences and the details around the product. The one thing I want to cover here is, through the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, we've heard a lot. We've heard, perspective from Vishal around the user experience and the being able to enable your users through a migration and integrate into a seamless ecosystem. Jerry's talked in detail about the products and its capabilities and the problems it solves, and Ben about how you go about a migration. But really, what it boils down to are these key areas around the complexity of a migration is something that you just heard about: hundreds, thousands of users, applications, custom configurations, and there's just countless ways that things could go wrong. And that's what makes a lot of people very weary and risk averse to wanting to make those big moves. And we at MightyID, with our capabilities and partnering with an integrator like Tevora, help you do that very seamlessly, very successfully, and get you on your path to a better user experience, better value, and so on and so forth. The importance of the phase approach is like the old adage that goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So this phase approach is critical. It doesn't matter what tool you're using, doesn't matter how much automation there is, there needs to be a plan and a phased approach to these types of efforts, especially when you're talking about user identity, because identities are how business gets done today. So, making sure that the phased approach is there and you're working, whether you're trying to do it yourself or whether you're working with a partner, the importance of that phased approach remains the same. We talked about how, how we ease the complexity with MightyID. Our like Jerry said, our powerful backup and restoration capabilities, our continuous identity synchronization, coupled with phase deployment strategies and so on and so forth, as well as rollback features and other capabilities that MightyID brings to the table. It ensures a safer and more efficient migration with much, much fewer manual interventions. The next thing we talked about and we learned today was, the benefits of using it to minimize user impact. Again, Vishal called it out earlier, but zero downtime migrations are very, very desirable. Anyone doing a migration, whether it's something from a firewall to an identity platform or anything like that, understands the importance of how much downtime am I going to take? What is it going to mean to my users? What is it going to mean to my business? So with MightyID, you're looking at zero downtime migrations. That's huge value and a seamless user experience for not only your end users, but it also makes life easier for the IT teams. And then also the final thing I just want to point out is real world customer success. We have experience and successful migrations under our belt with our integration partner at Tevora. I mean, the reality here is faster migration timelines, reduced costs, no downtime, business impact. It proves that a well-planned migration coupled with the right tool and the right, tool in MightyID yields excellent results. So, these points emphasize the challenges, the solutions, the success of what you can do when you want to migrate to Microsoft Entra. So again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time. I want to thank again, Jerry and Ben and Vishal for providing their perspectives and giving us this talk today. We do want to open things up for a Q&A session. I'm sure there's some questions. If you do have questions, I would ask that at the top of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can click on that Q&A button, and then you can enter in your questions there. So I'll give it a few minutes if you got questions, and I'll look for the questions and then read them off to the team, and we'll answer them as best we can. And if I had like the game show music to play, I would be playing it right now. So and if you're having problems putting it into the QA session, I can also see it. You can also just put it in the chat too. But great. Okay, we have a question right now. The question is, even using MightyID, what challenges have you experienced during a migration project? I think that's a great question for Ben. He's got tons of war stories. I'm sure if any of you wanted to hear even more of those, he'd be happy to talk to you outside of this this event. But Ben, what challenges have you experienced during a migration event, even with MightyID?
Yeah, I'd say honestly, probably one of the funny ones that seems to come up most often is the idea of having to figure out who actually owns applications. In a lot of cases, they end up in an identity platform, and it takes a little while to figure out who actually controls this app, who really speaks for how it's used. And it seems like that comes up a lot with organizations that have large and complex environments for their applications. It can get really easy to lose track of who's actually ultimately in charge of these things, and that's usually one of the biggest focuses during the initial planning phases there. In terms of other challenges, I mean the biggest thing is usually just getting a good grasp for the technical team on some of the changes and shifts, such as we talked about moving from Okta to Entra, and usually just a matter of making sure we have a good grasp on how to go about the same things within Entra that you were doing within Okta previously, and that's another big part of the whole run portion of it, is just ensuring that we have the right training coming across. But generally speaking, that tends to be where the biggest focuses tend to be, and the largest challenges that we're addressing along the way.
Great, and that's a really good point. A migration event also gives the opportunity to do some cleanup, right? So, if you're sitting there and no one really knows who owns these applications or something like that, that's a great time to get that documented, get it well understood, capture it, because we all know that people who have been IT operators for a while now, sometimes as your environment grows organically, not everything gets documented the way we would like. So it's a great opportunity to capture those kinds of data points also. We have another question here that says, how does MightyID ensure data integrity and security during the migration process? That could be Jerry or Ben, but Jerry, you want to take a first crack at that question?
Sure thing. I talked a little bit more about our compliance pedigree and the fact that we put a lot of emphasis on ensuring that our product improves the compliance for our customers, and not just bolts on kind of like a fly-by-night startup sort of approach. With that, we take a very serious position on security. So we use very strong encryption. Everything, of course, is stored encrypted. We transmit everything encrypted. We use we're very strict on access to our production systems. That, of course, is not only limited, but it's also logged and audited. In addition to that, We use best practices for high availability. So we use multiple regions. So we are currently hosting our infrastructure on AWS. We use a multi-region high availability infrastructure model in each one of the target geographies. So we have a US region, we have a Canadian region, we have a European region. We have the ability for dedicated infrastructure, should something like that be of interest. We use rotating keys. So there's really a lot of focus around it. In addition to that, we do quarterly pen testing and kind of go a little bit above and beyond kind of what the compliance frameworks require of us, because we know that we are handling business sensitive information that could be very damaging were it to be get to be lost or leaked or damaged in the event that the customers needed it.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Ben, did you have anything you might want to add to that, or do you think Jerry covered it from the migration perspective?
I think Jerry covered it pretty well. I guess one quick thing I'd add is that it also gives you the capability to have that state tracking throughout the process. That way, for instance, if you're going through a troubleshooting process where this application isn't working, we need to figure out why that's the case. We can find out really quickly at any point in time exactly how it was configured, so that you can quickly get it back up to a working state.
Excellent point. Excellent point. The backup restoration capabilities just in general help provide that integrity along the way. Great. Another question.
And you can.
Oh, go ahead,
sorry,
Jerry.
just to pivot on that, we do have, in addition to receiving the identity providers change logs, we do have the ability to kind of search on it and do some additional analytics. So you could actually do some tracing capabilities. It was really more intended for breach investigations, but certainly you could use it for trying to determine the root cause of any kind of change or even do change tracking over time.
Great. Awesome. And so there's another question here that talks about, the question is, does MightyID handle complex environments with multiple identity providers and custom applications? Maybe both of you could weigh in on that a little bit, but Jerry, could you take a first crack at that question?
Sure. So, we of course built our platform to support the identity provider as much as we can. In the case of migration, of course we're focusing on the items that translate well from one identity provider to the other. So the way that we built it, we're not doing a one-to-one translation between providers, but we actually do, we kind of, our transformation engine kind of goes through a common configuration. And what that allows us to do is to easily add additional providers. So for instance, we just recently launched support for ping. So we don't have to build a ping to Okta and a ping to Entra transformer engine. We just have to build ping to common. And so that allows us to basically take that going to any other provider. So it allows us to not only quickly add additional providers, but to do some more interesting things like supporting providers that we may not want to support long-term. We could do something temporary, for instance, like a one-off in the event of an on-prem or some of the legacy provider that you wanted to migrate from. That's a capability that our transformation engine was specifically architected and designed to be able to support. So it does have this extensibility to allow for more variety of source tenants. The destination tenants still have to be one of the ones that we support, but the source tenants can be from a much larger variety. With respect to custom applications, again, our solution was built to be very sort of generic. So whether it's a SAML configuration or OIDC or what have you, bookmark apps, things like that, we will support that as a general course. I did talk about the fact that there are some, often some attribute or property dependencies. Some of those have to be reverse engineered. And we've basically effectively built a rules engine to be able to translate as many of those as we can. And we've seen hundreds of applications. But there, of course, could always be an application that might throw some weird curveball at us. And, we would, work to support that as quickly as we could. I don't know if that fully answers this question.
I think it does. And I think the key thing here is, the the bottom line is we do support multiple identity providers. When it comes to just moving from one to another, we can certainly be flexible and support a larger group there. And applications are the most probably some of the most complex pieces of any type of migration, and custom applications and pose that even greater complexity. And that's why as much as we automate things, having the automation that we do and what our engines do, and coupled with experts like Tevora to help take a look at that application and how to best migrate it is key here to the success. So thank you for that, Jerry. We got time for one last question here. I think Ben, we might start with you on this one. Maybe if Jerry wants to add to it. But what kind of support and timeline can we expect for migration using MightyID?
So I guess the short answer is it definitely depends on your environment. There is still some legwork that does have to occur. MightyID hasn't quite gotten to the point where it's 3 button clicks and you're all done, but it definitely makes the whole thing a lot simpler. So I'd say it's much shorter than you would see without it. But it does still have a bit of work to it. I would say the average migration, we're normally looking at somewhere in the range of weeks to a couple of months, as opposed to looking at it at months to years in order to get everything completed. So hopefully that helps to answer that question. But otherwise, we'd love to jump into it specifically for your organization and talk specifics and give you an idea from there.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I agree. I mean, there's nothing that can take the place of having a conversation to understand the environment more. But what I heard you say was, it significantly reduces the time frame. The support that you're going to get is a seamless level of support between Tevora and MightyID. Like Jerry said, some of the complexities around applications or even multiple identity providers, we're going to be there with you side by side the entire way, along with a partner like Tevora to make sure you are completely successful through that migration. So anyways, guys, thanks again, Jerry and Ben, for your time. Vishal, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. Thanks everyone who stuck around to listen to the stories, the details, all the challenges and benefits and ways that we can help you be more successful in a migration to Microsoft Entra. If you have any questions after this, feel free. You can send it to me directly. My email's there at MightyID.com. And you can also connect with me or Jerry or Ben also through LinkedIn. You can reach out to us and hit us up there. And we'd love to hear from you if you got any questions. With that, I'll ring the closing bell, say thank you again one last time, and have a great day, everybody. See ya.